Every aisle led to you. A Hood Eloquence original story. Chapter 1, Aisle 7. The morning shift at Carver's Fresh Market started the way most of Rachel Hendrix's mornings did, with somebody needing something from her before she had both feet through the door. "Rachel, baby, the produce delivery came in wrong again," said Miss Gloria from behind the service desk, waving a clipboard like it was a white flag. "I need you to sort the invoice before Donnie sees it and loses his mind." Rachel set her purse under the counter without breaking stride. "Give it here." She took the clipboard, scanned the numbers, found the error in 30 seconds flat, and circled it with the red pen she kept tucked behind her ear. "Tell them they shorted us 14 flats of strawberries, and they need to credit the account or resend by Thursday. I'll pull the original order number for you." Miss Gloria pressed a hand to her chest. "Lord, what would we do without you?" Rachel just smiled, the soft, practiced smile of a woman who had learned not to take up too much space with her answer. She'd been at Carver's for 6 years. She knew every system, every vendor contact, every temperamental freezer unit, and which one would rattle if you didn't close it at the right angle. She was officially a floor associate. Unofficially, she was the reason the store ran. She was 35, with deep brown skin and natural hair she kept pinned back in a twist during work hours. She had her mother's high cheekbones and her grandmother's eyes, the kind that noticed everything. She wasn't a tall woman, but she carried herself like she'd survived enough to stand steady, and most people who knew her understood that to be true. By 10 o'clock she was already on her third role of the morning, produce restocker, invoice corrector, and now online order runner. The store's curbside pickup had grown fast, and Rachel had quietly become the one everyone trusted to do the deliveries. She packed the bags herself, double-checking substitutions, making sure the cold items stayed cold. She treated every order like it was her own groceries. The Jackson order was fourth on her route that Tuesday. She pulled the van up to the address, a newer build in the Hartwell subdivision, clean lines, well-kept lawn, the kind of house that said its owner was too busy to be home often. She loaded the reusable bags onto her cart and rolled up the wide paver path, buzzing the call button at the door. She heard footsteps, decisive ones, the kind that didn't hesitate, and then the door opened. The man standing in the frame was tall. Not just tall, but proportioned in a way that made height look like a natural inheritance rather than an accident. He had deep brown skin, close-cut hair touched with gray at the temples, and the kind of face that was still gathering itself toward handsome in middle age. He was wearing a dress shirt with the sleeves rolled to the elbow, a phone pressed between his shoulder and his jaw, and an expression that shifted the moment he saw her. He held up one finger, 1 second, and said into the phone, "I'll call you back." He didn't wait for the other person to respond. He just ended the call and looked at her. "Hi," he said. Just that. Rachel had delivered groceries to hundreds of doors. She had been greeted with everything from barely awake grunts to full conversations she hadn't invited. She had never, not once, been stopped mid-step by the sound of a man saying a single syllable. She recovered. Professional. "Good morning. Jackson order? I have 9 bags, 2 cold, 1 frozen. I can set them just inside if you. Please." He stepped back and held the door. "Come in. I appreciate it." She brought the bags in efficiently, setting them on the wide kitchen island. The kitchen was immaculate in the way that meant it was rarely used, clean surfaces, the faint smell of coffee, a legal pad on the counter covered in handwriting that moved fast and sharp. "You do this every week?" he asked, watching her with his arms folded loosely across his chest. "The deliveries?" "Yes. Different routes, different days. For the whole store?" "When they need me to. I fill in wherever." He tilted his head, just slightly. "What's your name?" She straightened and looked at him directly, because she had learned a long time ago that people who wanted to diminish you counted on you not looking them in the eye. He didn't seem like that kind of man, but the habit held. "Rachel. Terron." He extended his hand. "Terron Jackson." She shook it. His grip was firm but not performative. His hand was warm. She let go first. "Everything looks right," she said, glancing at the bags. "But I noticed you had 2 substitutions. We were out of the organic olive oil, so we used the store brand, same grade. And It's fine," he said. "Really. Whatever you chose is fine." He paused. "You made the call yourself?" "On the substitutions. I always do. The system flags it, but I check it before I pack." Something crossed his face. Not surprise exactly, more like recognition. Like a man who spent his days surrounded by people who didn't pay attention suddenly meeting someone who did. "That's rare," he said. Rachel reached for her scanner to confirm delivery and noticed him still watching her. Not the way men sometimes watched her, calculating, proprietary. He was watching her the way you watch something you weren't expecting and aren't sure yet what to do about. She understood the feeling exactly, because she was having it too. "Have a good day, Mr. Jackson," she said. "Terron," he said. "Please." She was already walking toward the door. But she was smiling by the time she reached the van, and she let herself have that for exactly the length of the driveway before she put it away and moved on to the next stop. That evening, Rachel pulled into her driveway and sat for a moment before going inside. It was a habit she'd developed, a minute of stillness between the world and her home, a kind of decompression chamber so she could be fully present when she walked through the door. Her son was at the kitchen table when she came in, textbook open, earbuds in one ear, pencil tapping a restless rhythm against the wood. Randall Hendrix was 17, almost 18, and he had grown into someone Rachel sometimes looked at sideways because she couldn't quite believe she'd had a hand in making him. He was tall like his father, but that was where the resemblance ended. He had her eyes and her grandmother's instincts, and a soul that had survived things it shouldn't have had to. He pulled out one earbud. "Hey, Ma. How was it?" "Long." She set her bag down and kissed the top of his head the way she'd been doing since he was small, even though he was half a foot taller than her now. "How's the calc?" "It's trying to take me out." "It's not." She looked at the problem he was stuck on. "You're setting up the integral wrong. Start from the inner bound." He looked at her, then at the problem, then back at her. "How do you even know that?" "You work at a grocery store." "I work at a grocery store now. I have a math brain, always have. Don't let life fool you into thinking it erased what's in you." She tapped the page. "Try it." He tried it. His pencil moved differently. "Oh. Oh, that's yeah, okay. She moved to the refrigerator and started thinking about dinner. They ate together every night she was home. It was non-negotiable, one of the few things in their life that had stayed constant through all the years of turbulence. Randall talked about his AP classes and the college applications he was refining, the early acceptance he was hoping for from State's engineering program. Rachel listened the way she always did, fully, without multitasking, without the phone in her hand. She had decided a long time ago that the best thing she could give her son wasn't things. It was her presence. It was after dinner, when they were washing up together, that Randall said casually, "Oh, you know Mr. Jackson? From the community center." Rachel's hands stilled in the soapy water for just a beat. "What about him?" "He came in today to help Coach run the STEM workshop. He's been coming in for like 2 months. He's cool. He actually knows what he's talking about, doesn't talk down to us like we're little kids." Randall handed her a wet glass to dry. "He asked about you, actually." "About me?" "He said he met a woman named Rachel from Carver's today and asked if I knew you." "I told him you were my mom." A pause. He got this look. "What kind of look?" "The kind grown folks get when they're trying to be cool, but they're not." Rachel set the dried glass in the cabinet. Her heart was doing something she hadn't asked it to do. "Mind your business, Randall." He grinned, wide and unrepentant, her grandmother's grin. "I'm just saying. He seems like good people." "Good night, baby." He laughed all the way up the stairs. Chapter 2, Special Orders. He came into the store 3 days later. Rachel was behind the customer service counter updating a vendor log when she heard the automated door and looked up out of reflex. Most customers she registered and forgot. Terron Jackson she registered and couldn't forget because he was already looking for her. He spotted her, and his expression did that thing again, that quiet, unguarded shift, before he caught it and walked over with the measured confidence of a man who was used to rooms that noticed him. "Good morning," he said. "Good morning, mister." She stopped herself. "Terron." He smiled. It was a real smile, not a performance. It reached his eyes and stayed there. "I wanted to ask if you could help me put together a standing order. Some specific things I can never find or always forget to get. That's something our front desk handles. Miss Gloria can set it up. I'd rather you did it. Not pushy. Just honest. If that's possible." Rachel set down her pen. "I can help you start the form. What do you need?" He pulled out his phone and read from a list he'd clearly made in advance. French press coffee, specific brands, the kind of olive oil the system had run out of during the last delivery, a particular brand of sparkling water, fresh herbs weekly. Each item was specific without being fussy. The list of a man who'd learned exactly what he liked and saw no reason to apologize for it. "This is a reasonable order," Rachel said, typing. "We can source most of it same week. The herbs I'll have to coordinate with produce. Whatever works." He wasn't looking at her screen. He was looking at her. "Can I ask you something?" She kept typing. "You just did." He laughed, a surprised, genuine sound. "Fair enough. Let me try again. Can I ask you something else?" "Depends on what it is." "Have dinner with me." She stopped typing. Not dramatically, just the small, honest pause of a woman who hadn't been asked that question by anyone worth considering in a very long time. She looked at him. "You don't know me," she said. "That's the point of dinner. I work here." "You work here," he agreed. "I don't. I'm a customer. There's no policy against it." "How do you know that?" "I checked." That startled a sound out of her that was almost a laugh. "You checked the store policy before coming in here." "I'm a detailed man." He said it simply, without arrogance. "I don't ask for things I haven't thought through." Rachel looked at him for a long moment. He held her gaze without flinching. There was something in that, the steadiness of him, the way he wasn't performing confidence, but simply living inside it, that she felt somewhere below her sternum. I'll think about it, she said. That's all I'm asking for. He took the order form, thanked her, and left. And Rachel stood at the counter for 30 seconds longer than she needed to, looking at the door. She thought about it for 4 days. She thought about it while stocking shelves and sorting deliveries and helping Miss Gloria navigate a vendor dispute and driving Randall to his SAT prep and eating dinner and washing dishes and lying in the dark of her bedroom at 11 o'clock, staring at the ceiling. Freedom, she had learned, was not a single door you walked through. It was a hallway. And the hallway was longer than anyone told you it would be when you were still standing at the first door, trying to get it open. She had married Devin Hendrix at 22, which in retrospect was the age she'd been least equipped to make a decision that size. He was charming in the way that some people are charming, completely and strategically, like a climate-controlled environment that lets you forget there's weather on the other side of the glass. By the time the glass cracked, she was 25 with a 3-year-old son and a collection of small damages she didn't yet have the vocabulary for. It had taken her 4 more years to leave. The leaving itself had been the easier part. The years afterward, watching Devin find new ways to reach back in, using Randall as leverage, appearing at her job, calling her mother, showing up at her doorstep with version 3 of himself, those years had taught her something important. She was not afraid of Devin. She was afraid of what loving someone else might cost. That was the thing she turned over in the dark. Not whether Terron Jackson was decent. She could read people, she'd had to learn how. He was decent. She turned over whether she was ready to risk being wrong again. Whether she could carry something new without bracing for the moment it broke. On day 5, Randall came home from the community center and dropped his bag by the door and said, without preamble, Mr. Jackson stayed after the workshop today to help me with my engineering application essay. He spent like an hour on it. Didn't have to. Rachel looked up from the stove. What? He knows about the admissions process. He went through a program like that when he was coming up. He knew exactly what they're looking for. Randall sat down at the table. He's the real deal, Ma. I'm just putting that out there. Are you working for him now? I'm just telling you what I see. I'm 17, not blind. Rachel turned back to the stove. Her son. Her perceptive, careful, entirely too knowing son. Eat was all she said. But the next morning she texted the number on the order form. She'd kept it in her pocket for 5 days, which she was aware was not something you did with numbers you planned to throw away, and she typed. Dinner. Friday. You pick. His response came in 40 seconds flat. Done. I'll send you the details. Thank you, Rachel. She put her phone back in her apron pocket and went back to work. And if she smiled for the next 20 minutes, she was the only one who noticed. Chapter 3, First Table. He chose a restaurant that was neither too formal nor too casual, a small place downtown with good lighting and better food, the kind of spot that suggested taste without requiring a performance. Rachel noticed that immediately, the way she noticed everything. The choice said he'd thought about what she might be comfortable in, not just what he wanted to show her. She wore a wrap dress in a deep burgundy, her hair down for the first time in what felt like months, small gold earrings her mother had given her. She looked at herself in the mirror before she left and felt, briefly, like someone she used to know before life had gotten so determined to use all of her up. Terron was already there when she arrived, standing near the host's stand rather than sitting at the table, waiting for her so he could walk in with her. Another small thing. Another thing she noticed. He looked good in a way that was quiet about it. A dark sweater, slacks, a fresh shape on his fade. He smelled like cedar and something clean underneath. You look beautiful, he said. Not as a greeting. Just as the truth. Thank you. She meant it. You clean up well yourself. He smiled and offered his arm, and she took it, and they walked to the table. The conversation surprised her. Not because she'd expected him to be dull, she hadn't. But because she'd forgotten what it felt like to talk to someone who asked questions they actually wanted the answers to. Terron Jackson was a listener. He sat across from her with the patient attention of a man who had somewhere to be and no desire to be there, because this, right here, was where he'd chosen. He told her about the company. He was 2 years into building a data infrastructure firm that worked with small and mid-sized businesses. It was growing faster than he'd planned, which meant he was perpetually behind on everything else. She asked about the community center work, how it had started. My mentor did it for me, he said. When I was about Randall's age. I was smart enough, but nobody around me knew what to do with that. My mentor walked me through every application, every program, every step. He probably saved my life, not dramatically, just by showing me there was a door I didn't know existed. He turned his glass slowly. I figure if I've got time to give, I give it there. Rachel watched him. You know my son. I do. He's exceptional. That kid is going to do something serious. He is. There was a fierceness in her voice, brief and involuntary. He's worked so hard. He's worked harder than he should have had to. Terron heard the weight in that. He didn't pry, but he didn't pretend it wasn't there either. Kids who have to work harder early, They usually know how to do things the easy road ones don't. He'll carry that with him. Rachel nodded. She appreciated that he hadn't asked. She appreciated more that he'd heard. They talked through 2 courses. He made her laugh twice with self-deprecating stories about his early entrepreneur disasters, a prototype he'd pitched to the wrong audience, a server migration he'd supervised personally that had gone magnificently wrong. He told the stories with the ease of a man who had made peace with failure as a process. Over dessert, which he'd asked if she wanted rather than assuming, she said, "Can I ask you something?" "Of course. Have dinner with me. You're starting a company. You're clearly someone with options. Why'd you come back to the store? Why'd you?" She gestured at the evening around them. "Why'd you put in this kind of effort?" He set down his fork and looked at her with a directness that didn't feel aggressive. It felt like respect. "Because you were the first person I'd met in a long time who paid attention," he said. "To the order, to the substitutions, to the details." That sounds small, but it isn't. People who pay attention to small things, they're usually present for big things too. That's rare. He paused. "And because I looked up from my phone for the first time and I don't know how long, and I saw you standing at my door, and I thought, I want to know her. I haven't thought that about anyone in years." Rachel held that for a moment. Outside the restaurant window, the street moved the way city streets do, indifferent and continuous. Inside, something quiet had shifted. "I should tell you something," she said. "Okay. My life is more complicated than it looks. My son's father," she chose her words the way she chose everything, carefully. "He doesn't let go well. I've been building something for myself and Randall for years, and every time I get a good piece of ground under me, he finds a way to shake it. I'm telling you this now because I don't want to get to a later point and have you feel like you weren't warned." Terron didn't flinch, didn't shift his weight, didn't look away. "I appreciate you telling me. I'm not afraid of complicated. You should know what you're saying." "Rachel." He said her name the way she'd heard it from a handful of people in her life, like it was a complete thought. "I'm 40 years old. I've been through enough of my own to know that anything worth having comes with some weight. I'm not looking for simple. I'm looking for real." She looked at him across the table. She looked at him the way she looked at a problem she couldn't yet solve, carefully, from every angle, with a mind that wanted to be sure before it committed. She didn't have a solution yet, but for the first time in a long time, she wanted to keep working on it. "Okay," she said. He didn't ask what she meant. He seemed to understand. The dinner ended 2 hours after it started, and he walked her to her car, and he held the door, and when she was inside he said, "I'd like to do this again. Whenever you're ready. I'll let you know," she said. But she already knew she would. Chapter 4. What Randall Knew. The next several weeks moved in layers. On the surface, Rachel's life looked the same. Early shifts, the practiced choreography of the store, home by 6, dinner with Randall, the quiet evenings that had always been the part of her life she'd built most deliberately. But beneath that surface, something had shifted its weight. Terron came into Carver's twice more, always with a reason, a question about the standing order, a specific item he wanted to source, and always with the patience of a man who understood that she was still deciding. He never pushed. He chatted with her when she had time and didn't sulk when she didn't. He brought her a coffee once, just left it at the counter with a note that said, "For the woman who keeps the whole store running." She'd kept the note in her apron pocket for a week before she made herself throw it away. They texted in the evenings. Nothing heavy, questions about each other's days, the occasional recommendation. He sent her a documentary he thought she'd find interesting. She sent him back a correction on something he'd said about a historical event he'd gotten slightly wrong. He responded with a laughing emoji and, "You're going to keep me honest." She wrote back, "Somebody has to," and then stared at her phone like she was 15 years old. She hadn't been 15 in 20 years. She had forgotten it could feel like this, the slow, specific warmth of someone becoming present in your daily thinking. She hadn't told Randall anything directly. But Randall knew. She found out how much he knew on a Wednesday, when she came home to find him sitting at the kitchen table not doing homework, just sitting, which was unusual enough to make her stop in the doorway. "What's wrong?" He looked at her, and for a moment he looked younger than 17. He looked like the 9-year-old who used to crawl into her bed during thunderstorms, before he'd had enough years to learn to pretend things didn't scare him. "Dad called," he said. Rachel set her keys on the counter slowly. "What did he want?" "He wanted to know if you were seeing someone. He said one of his boys saw you going into a restaurant downtown." Randall's jaw tightened. "I told him I didn't know. Because you hadn't told me." "But I do know." She sat down across from him. "Randall, I'm not mad at you," he said, and his voice had that careful quality he developed over years of navigating between his 2 parents, the quality of someone who had learned to speak precisely to avoid being used as a weapon. "I get why you didn't tell me. I get why you'd want to keep something to yourself before you knew if it was real." "It's still early," she said. "I didn't want to put anything in front of you that wasn't." "Ma." He looked at her steadily. "I've been watching you hold everything together my whole life. You've worked every job they needed you for. You helped me with every class I've struggled with. You've kept this house. You've kept yourself together even when Dad made it almost impossible. He stopped. You're allowed to have something. I've been waiting for you to have something for a long time. Rachel looked at her son and felt something shift in her chest, a grief and a gratitude and a fierce, overwhelming love, all pressed together. You're going to make me cry, she said, and I just did my makeup. He almost smiled. Almost. I need to tell you something, though. About Dad. The almost smile faded. I've been waiting to tell you because I didn't know how. But if you're thinking about letting someone in, you need to know. Tell me. Randall folded his hands on the table. He looked older than 17 right now. He looked like a young man who had been carrying something too heavy for too long and had finally found the right moment to set it down. You know how Dad always shows up right when things are going good for you? Right when you get a raise or a new opportunity or any time it looks like you're moving forward. Yes, he does that on purpose. He told me once. Not in those words, but he told me. He'd say things like, your mama thinks she can do better without me, let's see how long that lasts, and then he'd call your job, or he'd call your landlord, or he'd tell your friends things that weren't true. He taught me, Randall's voice caught. He taught me little things. Little ways to pass information back to him. About your schedule. About who called the house. He framed it like it was looking out for the family, but it was him using me to keep tabs on you. The kitchen was very quiet. Randall. I didn't do most of it. And I stopped completely about 2 years ago. I told him I was done, and he called me ungrateful, and I hung up. But I should have told you sooner. I'm sorry, Ma. I'm sorry. Rachel reached across the table and covered his hands with hers. Her son. Her boy who had been navigating a battlefield he'd been dropped into through no fault of his own, doing the best he could with the tools of a child. Listen to me, she said. You were a child. You were his child. He was supposed to protect you, not recruit you. None of what he did, none of what he made you feel like you had to do, that's on you. Do you hear me? He nodded. His eyes were wet. And I'm not angry with you. I'm angry for you. There's a difference. She squeezed his hands. You were protecting both of us the best way you knew how. They stayed like that for a long moment. Then Randall pulled himself together the way she'd watched him do his whole life, not by suppressing, but by deciding to keep going. He wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. Mr. Jackson, he said. At the center. I trust him, Ma. I've watched him. He doesn't have an angle. I know what angles look like, Dad taught me that at least. Rachel was quiet. He's the real thing, Randall said. I think you should let him in. And I think we should be careful, because Dad is going to find out eventually, and he's going to make it ugly. But I think you should do it anyway. She looked at her son. Her remarkable, perceptive, battered, and unbroken son. When did you get this wise? She asked. He finally, fully smiled. I had a good teacher. Chapter 5, Building Something. She told Terron about Randall's father on their third date, a Saturday afternoon walk through the park near the lake, casual enough that she could look at the water instead of at him when the words got heavy. She didn't tell him everything. She told him enough. Devin's habit of reappearing. The way he used Randall. The fact that she'd built her current life out of years of careful, patient work, and that she guarded it the way you guard something you've rebuilt from rubble. Terron walked beside her and listened. He didn't offer solutions. He didn't tell her what she should have done or what she should do. He just listened, and when she was finished he said, Thank you for trusting me with that. I needed you to know, she said. Because I won't have anything in my life that I'm hiding from my son or that makes my life smaller. I've spent years making it bigger. She gestured between them. If this is something, it has to fit into that. Honestly. I understand that, he said. He wasn't defensive. He sounded like a man who'd thought about his own life long enough to know what he was willing to accommodate. I want to earn your trust, Rachel. Not demand it. There's a difference. There is, she said. Most men don't know that. I've had enough experience watching things go wrong to understand what goes right. She stopped walking. He stopped too, half a beat later, and turned to look at her. The light was coming off the lake and touching the gray at his temples, and she thought, with the sudden clarity that sometimes hit her without warning, I think I could love this man. The thought didn't frighten her. That was the thing that surprised her most. One more thing, she said. Tell me. My son approves of you. Which is not something I've ever been able to say about anyone. In his 17 years of life, he has never once given me an endorsement. Terron's expression softened into something she hadn't seen from him before, a vulnerability, brief and real. That means everything to me, he said. More than you know. She believed him. She could see it. They started over. Slowly, quietly, on their own terms. There was no announcement, no performance, no public declaration. Rachel brought him into her world the way she did everything, with intention and on her own schedule. Terron matched her pace without complaint, understanding instinctively that her carefulness was not about him, but about the cost of being incautious. Randall became the unexpected bridge. He already knew Terron from the community center, and the transition from mentor of my friend's son to man my mother is seeing happened with a naturalness that Rachel hadn't dared hope for. The first time Terron came to the house for dinner, he and Randall had a 20-minute conversation about engineering program requirements before Rachel had even finished cooking. She stood at the stove listening to them talk and felt something she hadn't felt in a very long time. Safe. She felt safe. Not the absence of immediate threat kind of safe. The other kind. The kind that comes from being in a room with people who are genuinely themselves, where nothing has to be managed or maintained, where the air is just air. After dinner, Terron helped clear the table, not as a performance, not to impress, just because it was the next thing to be done. He and Randall argued cheerfully about a sports team while loading the dishwasher. Rachel dried the pots and let the sound fill the kitchen, and something in her chest that had been braced for a very long time finally slowly eased. The months deepened. Terron began to understand the architecture of her life, her shifts, her rhythms, the way she moved through her days. He learned that she was a morning person who needed quiet before 7. He learned that she read the same way she listened, with total absorption. He learned that she made decisions the way an engineer checks load-bearing walls, methodically, looking for weak points, refusing to commit until she was certain. He found all of this not frustrating but fascinating. She learned him too. The way he couldn't stop working until midnight and then crashed completely. The phone calls he took walking so he could think without sitting still. The vulnerability he kept professional and private that only surfaced in the quietest moments, the way he'd talk about his mother, who'd raised him alone and hadn't lived to see the company. The way he'd look at Randall sometimes with something that was almost grief, like he was watching a version of himself that had gotten the help he hadn't. One evening in October, she asked him, "Why haven't you had children of your own? You're clearly built for it." He was quiet for a moment. They were on her back porch, cups of tea, the city making its evening sounds in the distance. "I was with someone for a long time. We wanted to. It didn't work out between us before it could happen." A pause. "I told myself for a few years that I was okay with it. And then I started spending time with your son, and I realized I'm okay with however it comes to me, as long as it comes." Rachel looked at him in the half-dark. "He already has a father," she said carefully. "I know that. I'm not trying to be his father." He turned to look at her. "I'm trying to be someone in his life who shows up with integrity. Someone he can call. Someone who's in the stands when he walks into his first job interview and needs to know someone who loves him is somewhere nearby." He paused. "That's all. That's enough." Rachel set down her tea and reached for his hand in the dark. He turned his palm up without hesitation. That was the night she knew. Not as a decision, decisions came later. Just as a knowing. The quiet, certain arrival of a truth that had been making its way toward her for months. She was in love with Terron Jackson. And for the first time, the love didn't make her feel like something was about to be taken. Chapter 6, Devin. She should have known the peace wouldn't hold quietly. She'd known it intellectually. Randall had warned her, she'd warned Terron, she'd warned herself. But there is a difference between knowing a storm is coming and feeling it arrive. When it came the way Devin Hendrix always came, sideways and through someone she loved. It started with a call to her mother. Mrs. Hendrix, she'd kept the name because Randall had it and she refused to be erased from her own son's paperwork, found out about it when her mother called, voice pitched with worry, saying, "Baby, Devin came by here today. He's saying you're running around with some man who's inappropriate around Randall, and he's talking about going to the courts." Stop. Rachel set down the inventory sheet she'd been holding. The store was loud around her. She moved toward the back. "Mama, listen to me. There is nothing inappropriate about anything. He is a decent man and Randall knows him well and likes him. Devin is doing what he always does when he thinks I'm happy. I know, baby, I know. Don't let him in your house again. Don't take his calls. I'll come see you this weekend." She hung up and stood in the back hallway with her hands flat against the wall. 12 years. 12 years since she'd left and Devin Hendrix was still using the people around her as levers. She told Terron that evening. She'd been afraid he'd react the way men sometimes did, with bravado, with the impulse to escalate, to make the other man the problem to be solved. Instead, he sat across from her at her kitchen table and said, "What does he actually have? Legally, I mean. What's his actual access? Randall is 17. In 8 months he's 18. There's no legal lever left." She exhaled. "He knows that. This is about me. He can't control what I do, so he makes the environment around me so difficult that it's easier to pull back. Does it work? Historically." She looked at him. "It worked for a long time, yes. I pulled back from a promotion once. A friendship that was moving me forward. A move to a better neighborhood." She paused. "I'm not pulling back from this." Terron held her gaze. Okay meaning what?" "Okay meaning I hear you and I'm with you and we figure out what we need to figure out together." He leaned forward, elbows on the table. "I have a lawyer. Not to escalate, but to know exactly what your rights are and what he can and can't do. Information is leverage. We get informed, we stay calm, we don't give him a reaction to feed off of. Rachel studied him. You've dealt with difficult people before. I started a company. I've dealt with people who wanted to see it fail for all kinds of reasons. His voice was level. I learned that the best way to handle someone who wants your reaction is to refuse to give it. Devin is more than a difficult person. I know that. I'm not minimizing it. He reached across the table and put his hand over hers. I'm just telling you that you don't have to navigate it alone. You've been doing this alone for a long time. You don't have to anymore. She looked down at their hands. His, large and steady. Hers, smaller, the hands of a woman who had carried every bag herself for years. That's a harder thing for me to accept than you might think, she said quietly. I know, he said. I'm not in a hurry. 2 weeks later, Devin showed up at Carver's. Rachel was behind the customer service desk when she saw him come through the door. The years had not been particularly kind or unkind to Devin. He looked roughly the same broad jaw and easy walk, the same way of moving through a space like he was doing it a favor. He had a new tattoo on his neck and an old energy that she would have recognized from across a football field. She stayed behind the counter. She did not move toward him. She did not give her body away. He stopped a few feet from the desk, that particular smile on his face, the one that thought it was charming and had once, long ago, been something like it. You're looking good, Ratch. Is there something I can help you with? Deliberately formal. Deliberately public. Miss Gloria was 3 feet away. His smile didn't waver, but something behind it tightened. Just came to talk. You've been hard to reach. I'm at work. We can keep it brief. He glanced at Miss Gloria and back. I just want to know what's going on with you and this man you're seeing. Randall won't talk to me. Randall is a 17-year-old who makes his own choices about who he speaks to. He's my son. He's also mine. Her voice was quiet and completely steady. And he's fine. Your concern about who I choose to spend time with is noted, and it doesn't change anything. Something moved behind Devin's eyes, not quite anger, something more controlled than that, which was somehow more concerning. You don't know what you're dealing with. Sir, said Miss Gloria abruptly, looking up from her computer, can I help you with something? If you're not shopping, I'm going to have to ask you to step aside for customers. Devin looked at the older woman with the practiced expression of a man who had learned to recognize a wall. He looked back at Rachel. We'll talk, he said. Have a good day, Rachel said. He left. And Rachel stood very still for a moment, her hands flat on the counter, breathing the way she'd learned to breathe through the years of this, slow, deliberate, not giving the fear any room to settle. Miss Gloria slid her a cup of water across the counter without a word. Rachel took it. Thank you, Gloria. That one's trouble, Miss Gloria said quietly. Has been for a long time, I'd imagine. Yes, Rachel said. But I'm not afraid of him. Not anymore. Chapter 7, The Breaking Point. The thing about Devin Hendrix was that he didn't break things with his hands. He broke them with words, with rumors, with the slow, strategic erosion of support around a person until they had no one to stand with. Rachel had watched him do it. She'd been the one he'd done it to. He called Terron's company. She found out when Terron called her on a Tuesday morning, voice completely controlled in the way she'd come to recognize as his version of contained anger. Someone called the main line this morning. Spoke to my assistant. Implied that the phrasing was involved in a situation that could affect the reputation of the business. That's almost a direct quote. Rachel closed her eyes. I'm sorry. Don't apologize to me. You didn't do this. Is it serious? The business. Rachel, I need you to listen to me. My company is not in any danger because a man who's afraid of you finding happiness made a veiled and toothless call to my front desk. My assistant handles worse on pharmaceutical sales calls. A beat. But I think it's time we stopped being quiet about this. She knew what he meant. They'd moved carefully, kept things between themselves and Randall, not publicizing the relationship because she'd wanted to protect it while it was still growing. But quiet had become cover for Devin to operate in. What are you suggesting? Nothing dramatic. Just, we stop hiding. We go to Randall's next community center event together. We let your mother meet me. We live like people who are together because we are. His voice softened. I don't want to be your secret, Rachel. I want to be your person. She stood in the back of the store, her break almost over, and thought about the hallway. The long hallway of leaving. How many doors she'd had to open. This one felt like the last one, or at least like she could see daylight through it. Okay, she said. Okay. Yes. Okay. We stop hiding. Devin found out the week before Randall's birthday. Randall turned 18 on a Friday, and Terron had helped him plan a small party, just a few close friends, family, food. Not extravagant. Exactly what Randall wanted. Devin showed up uninvited. Of course he did. He came to the door with a gift and that smile, and Rachel answered it because Randall was in the backyard, and she refused to let her son's birthday be the venue for whatever Devin had planned. She opened the door and stood in the frame. "Hey," he said. "I know I wasn't invited, but it's my son's birthday, Ratch. You weren't invited because Randall didn't invite you." "That's his right." "His right." Devin shook his head with a short sound. "You've been filling his head with." "Nobody has filled his head with anything." Terron's voice came from just behind Rachel, calm, even, almost pleasant in the way of a man who knew exactly how much he didn't have to prove. He had come to the door without being summoned, because he'd heard the conversation, and because he was not a man who let the woman he loved stand alone. Devin looked at Terron. The two men faced each other across the threshold, the old history of Rachel's life, and the new possibility of it, in the same doorframe. "This him," Devin said. "Not a question." "This is Terron," Rachel said. "And this is the last conversation I'm having with you on my doorstep. Randall will reach out to you if and when he decides to. This," she gestured between herself and Terron, "is not your business. It is my business when you're replacing me. Nobody replaced you." Randall's voice cut across the yard. He'd heard. He walked through the house and came to stand beside his mother, 17-18, now years of watching this man pull and diminish and exhaust her, settling into a steadiness in his jaw. "You left yourself out, Dad. That's not on Mom. And it's not on him." He nodded at Terron. "My birthday is in my backyard. You can leave the gift if you want to, and you can call me next week if you want to talk. But not today. Not like this." The silence that followed was the particular silence of a man who has run the same play for 20 years and found the defense has finally caught up. Devin left the gift on the porch. He left without another word. They stood in the doorway, Rachel, Randall, and Terron, until the sound of his car had faded. Then Randall turned and walked back through the house to his party. Rachel looked up at Terron, and he looked at her, and she put her hand against his chest and felt him breathe. "Thank you for standing there," she said. "Thank you for letting me," he said. They stayed like that for one more breath, and then they went back in together. Chapter 8, A New Kind of Family. The months that followed Randall's birthday were the quietest in Rachel's memory, and she meant that as the highest form of praise. Devin did not disappear. Men like Devin rarely did, but he receded. Whether it was Randall's direct words, or Terron's calm and unmovable presence, or some shift in Devin's own life, the harassment cooled from a simmer to a background hum she'd learned long ago to tune past. He called Randall occasionally. Randall answered when he felt like it and didn't when he didn't. It was, finally, Randall's choice. That was the thing Rachel had wanted most for her son without ever quite articulating it, for him to have choices that were his own. Terron came for Sunday dinners the way seasons come, with a reliability that stopped feeling like an event and started feeling like weather. He and Randall had a running argument about some architecture theory that Rachel only half followed, but could have listened to for hours. He'd bring wine for her and snacks Randall liked, and he'd sit at her kitchen table and talk about his week with an openness that was still new to her, still something she leaned into like sunlight. They took a weekend trip in March, all three of them. Randall's college decision visit turned into a small adventure, Terron driving, the three of them arguing about radio stations and stopping at a diner at noon and walking the campus in the afternoon. When they got to the engineering building, Randall went quiet in a way that told Rachel he was overwhelmed, that good kind of overwhelmed, the kind that lives adjacent to hope. Terron looked at her over Randall's head and smiled. She smiled back. This was the thing she hadn't known how to imagine. Not just loving someone, but building a life in the shape that fit the people in it. Randall got his acceptance letter in April. Rachel found out at 3 in the afternoon on a Tuesday when her phone rang, and he was already yelling before she finished saying hello. Just one word over and over, I got in, Ma, I got in. And she sat down in the break room of Carver's Market and cried with the unself-conscious completeness of a woman who had worked toward something for 18 years and finally watched it arrive. She called Terron immediately after. He picked up on the second ring. He got in, was all she said. There was a silence, and then she heard something in his voice that she'd never heard before, a roughness, an emotion he was working around. Of course he did. He stopped. That is the best news I've heard in a long time, Rachel. I know, she said. Me too. He took them both to dinner that night to celebrate. Randall ordered the most expensive thing on the menu without embarrassment and talked for 2 hours about his plans, the engineering program, the student research lab he wanted to join, the internship pathway Terron had helped him map out. He was electric. He was free. At the end of the night, when Randall had gone to the bathroom and it was just the two of them at the table, Terron reached into his jacket pocket and set something on the table between them. A key. Rachel looked at it. Then at him. What is this? No pressure, he said, and he meant it. She could hear the absence of pressure in his voice, the complete sincerity of a man who had learned the difference between asking and demanding. My house has way too much room for one person. Randall is leaving in August. You're going to be in a house alone, which you've never actually been before in your adult life. This doesn't have to mean anything you're not ready for it to mean. He paused. Or it can mean everything. I'll follow your lead. Rachel looked at the key on the white tablecloth. She thought about 22-year-old Rachel, who had chosen the wrong door with absolute certainty. She thought about 30-year-old Rachel, who had been so burned she decided to have no doors at all. She thought about the hallway, and how long it had been, and how this man had found her in the middle of it and walked beside her without asking her to move faster than she could. She picked up the key. She held it in her palm for a moment. "We're going to take this slowly," she said. "Absolutely. And we're going to talk about everything before we decide anything." "Of course. And I'm keeping my name." He blinked. Then he laughed, the real laugh, the full one that she'd collected like something precious over these months. "Rachel, I would never. It's a beautiful name. It fits you perfectly." She closed her hand around the key. "Okay," she said. Randall came back from the bathroom, took one look at their faces, and said, "Okay, what happened?" "You both look like something happened." "Nothing," Rachel said, slipping the key into her pocket. "Absolutely nothing," Terron confirmed. Randall looked between them with the calm certainty of a boy who'd spent his whole life reading the room. "Uh-huh," he said, and sat down and picked up his dessert spoon. Rachel looked at her son across the table. The light was catching the same cheekbones she saw in the mirror every morning. He looked like the future, her future, his own future, the open unmapped space of a life that had finally gotten some room. She thought, "I did this. I stayed, and I fought, and I built this. He is sitting here, free and whole, because I refuse to stop." And the pride of it settled over her like something earned. Chapter 9, August. Move-in day came on a Saturday in late August, hot and bright, the kind of day that seems to understand it's marking something. They packed Randall's things the night before, Rachel and Terron both, with Randall directing and contradicting himself every 20 minutes. With the radio on and takeout containers on the counter and a low continuous warmth moving through the house that Rachel kept stopping to feel. The drive to campus took 2.5 hours. Randall slept in the back seat for the first hour, the way he'd slept on long drives since he was small, that boneless, trusting sleep of someone who feels safe in the vehicle. Terron drove. Rachel watched the highway and thought about nothing in particular and everything at once. "You okay?" Terron asked quietly, not looking away from the road. "I'm better than okay. I'm just feeling it." He reached over and covered her hand where it rested on the console. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. The campus was organized chaos, carts and parents, and nervous freshmen and RA volunteers in matching shirts. They found Randall's dorm, lugged the boxes up 2 flights, and spent 3 hours setting up the room with a focused efficiency that came from all 3 of them being the kind of people who knew how to work. When it was done, the room was his. His desk in the corner with his engineering textbooks lined up already. His mother's old blanket on the bed because he'd asked for it without pretending he hadn't. A photo on the shelf, the 3 of them at the birthday dinner, laughing at something the camera had caught them mid-sentence on. Randall stood in the middle of the room and looked around. He was 18 years old, this boy who had been born into difficulty and grown into someone extraordinary. He was about to become a man in the way that only happens when you step outside the life that raised you and begin building your own. Rachel watched him. Then he turned and hugged her, not the side hug of a teenage boy trying to be cool, but a full embrace, his arms around her the way hers had been around him when he was small, because he was big enough now that it had flipped. She pressed her face against his shoulder and let herself have 30 seconds of it, 30 seconds of being his mother without managing anything. "Thank you," he said into her hair. "For all of it. All of it, Ma." She could not speak. She just held on for those 30 seconds, and then she pulled back and looked at him and smiled the way she hadn't smiled in years, wide open, without armor. Randall turned to Terron, and there was a moment between them, 2 people who had found each other in the middle of a complicated story and built something real in the space between. Randall extended his hand. Terron took it. And then, after a beat, Randall pulled him into a brief, firm embrace. "Look after her," Randall said quietly. "Every day," Terron said. "I promise you." Randall nodded. He believed it. So did Rachel. They drove home in the early evening, the long slant of late summer light making everything look gilded. Rachel sat in the passenger seat with her shoes off and her feet on the dashboard, something she'd never done in someone else's car before, and Terron didn't say a word about it, just turned the music up slightly and drove. The house was quiet when they got back. Rachel's house, still hers, her name on the lease, her grandmother's plants on the porch, her life built room by room over years. Terron came inside with her, and they sat on the back porch as the evening settled, the tea growing cold between them, neither of them talking for a long time. The quiet was different now. It wasn't the quiet of absence, of managing aloneness. It was the quiet of 2 people who had said what needed to be said and could rest in the space afterward. "He's going to be magnificent," Terron said. "I know," Rachel said. "He already is." The last of the light left the sky. The first of the stars showed up, faint at first, then certain. Rachel tipped her head back and looked at them, and thought about all the versions of her life that had to burn down to clear ground for this one. She thought about the grocery store, and the delivery cart, and a door opening on a Tuesday morning, and a man saying hi like it was a complete sentence. She thought about Randall sitting at the kitchen table, carrying things too heavy for a boy. She thought about the key in her pocket, and the hallway she'd been walking, and the light she could finally see at the end of it. She thought, I am free. Not perfectly, not completely. Freedom doesn't work that way. But I am more free tonight than I have ever been. I want to go somewhere, she said. Right now? In general. I've never traveled. I've spent 18 years making sure Randall could, and he's going to, and she looked at Terron. I want to go somewhere. Anywhere. Just to know I can. He looked at her the way he sometimes did, like she was the most interesting problem he'd ever been lucky enough to sit with. Where do you want to go? She thought about it. She looked at the stars. She let herself want something without immediately calculating whether she'd earned it. Somewhere warm, she said. Somewhere with water. Somewhere nobody knows my name. He smiled. I'll plan it. We'll plan it, she corrected. Together. Together, he agreed. She reached for his hand in the dark. He was already reaching for hers. They stayed on the porch until the stars were thick overhead, and the city hummed its quiet hum, and the house that had been the container of so much surviving held them gently, this woman who had chosen, finally, to also live. This man who had walked through her door, and had the patience to wait for her to open it. This life, rebuilt slowly and by hand, standing on ground that was hers. Standing. Solid. Real. The end. Subscribe for more Hood Tales adventures.